Today, we're diving deep. We're going to conduct a forensic analysis of a really key theological argument from Ayatollah Javadi Amoli's exegesis of Surah Maryam, specifically looking at verse 41. We're going to meticulously unpack the central question that the text itself poses. If the divine command is this absolute creative force, how in the world does it coexist with natural law, with cause and effect, and, this is the big one, with human free will? So, let's begin our examination.
Now, just to be clear, our analysis is grounded entirely in this primary source you see here. We're digging into Ayatollah Javadi Amoli's work on Surah Maryam to really understand his argument in its original context. This isn't going to be a quick summary. Think of it more as a systematic deconstruction of a really profound theological framework. We're going to trace the logic, step by step, exactly as it's presented in the text.
So, the text builds its argument in 5 very distinct stages, and we're going to follow that structure precisely. First, we'll establish the foundational principle, this idea of an absolute divine command. Second, we'll look at the distinction between 2 different forms of God's will. Third, we'll detail the role of angels as the go-betweens. Fourth, we'll see how the space for human choice is carved out. And finally, we'll put it all together to see how these elements form a single, unified cosmic system.
All right, so the argument kicks off with the one foundational principle that really sparks this entire theological inquiry, the absolute and totally creative nature of God's command.
This Quranic verse is the starting point for everything. It establishes God's command not as some kind of request, but as a direct creative act. The word be is literally the same thing as creation itself. It's an irresistible, instantaneous force. And you can probably see how this premise immediately presents a profound intellectual problem. So here's the core conflict, right? If God's command is absolute and creative, does that make everything else, like physics, biology, and especially our own decisions, kind of irrelevant? How can God's immediate power and all these systems of cause and effect exist at the same time? This is the central intellectual puzzle that the text sets out to solve step by step. The key to cracking this puzzle, according to the text, lies in a really critical distinction. The argument basically says that divine will isn't this one single monolithic thing. Instead, it actually operates in 2 totally distinct modes. Okay, so the first form is called Amr Takwini, or the creative command. This is the be and it is command we just talked about. This is the will that creates the universe, that establishes the laws of physics, that sustains existence itself. It's not a command given to something, it is the very fabric of reality. The second form is Amr Tashri'i, the legislative command. This is the divine will you see in things like guidance, moral laws, and spiritual obligations. Think of commands like pray or do not steal. This command doesn't compel reality to change, it invites a willed response from beings who can choose. Now, the text gives us a really powerful analogy to make this distinction crystal clear. The creative command, Amr Takwini, is like the act of you just thinking about something. It's internal, it's immediate, it just happens. The legislative command, Amr Tashri'i, on the other hand, is like you verbally telling another person to do something. It's external, and it requires their choice to comply. This analogy really drives home that fundamental difference between directly creating reality and simply guiding conduct within it. Okay, so if the creative command establishes all the universal laws, the next logical question the text tackles is, what's the mechanism for that? How is it all executed? And the argument introduces the role of angels as the answer to that question. And the text makes a really crucial clarification here. In this framework, angels are not independent agents just flying around exercising their own will. No. Instead, they are the very mechanisms, the conduits, through which that creative command is actually made real. You could almost say they are the executive instruments of the laws of nature. So what you get is this very clear cosmic hierarchy, this chain of command. The will originates from the divine source. Then it's executed by these angelic intermediaries. And the effect that we can all observe is the orderly functioning of the natural world, everything from the planets moving in orbit to the processes of biology. And the text then gets into some amazing granular detail on what these angelic functions actually are, outlining this comprehensive cosmic administration. You see specific roles assigned, like upholding the divine throne, managing the affairs of the universe, distributing sustenance, carrying revelation, overseeing natural phenomena like rain and life and death, and even recording human deeds. This paints a picture of a deeply integrated and administered system. So now we finally get to the central question about humanity's place in this whole divinely ordered system.
The analysis shifts from that massive cosmic scale right down to the human level to tackle the idea of free will.
The text uses a very specific term here, ikhtiyar. That's how it defines human free will. And it's really crucial to understand that this is not the freedom to defy the creative command. You can't just choose to ignore gravity. Rather, ikhtiyar is the specific ability to consciously choose how you respond to the legislative command.
And this right here is the logical linchpin of the whole argument. I mean, think about it. Why would God issue a legislative command, like pray or be just or do good, if we had absolutely no ability to choose? The very existence of guidance implies the freedom to either follow it or to ignore it. That legislative command only has meaning because ikhtiyar exists.
So let's bring all these pieces together. We've looked at the two forms of will, the role of the angels, and the capacity for human choice. Now we can see how the text weaves them all into a single coherent framework.
So the integrated model can be summed up in 4 key points. First, you have divine sovereignty, which is absolute. Through that, creative command governing everything. Second, there's the cosmic mechanism, which is the angels executing that command, which we experience as the laws of nature. Third, you have divine guidance, provided through the legislative command. And fourth, you have human agency, our ikhtiyar, which is our freedom to respond to that guidance. So in this model, there's no conflict at all between divine power and human freedom. They operate in different spheres.
And so, we'll conclude with a final point for you to think about. If divine will really does operate in these two distinct modes, one that's creative, setting up the unchangeable realities of the universe, and one that's legislative, giving us guidance within that reality, how does a framework like this reshape our understanding of big concepts like destiny and personal responsibility?